Hi, this is Robert Shear with another edition of the Shear Post interviews with Ray McGovern, former CIA expert on Russia, 27 years with the agency as a top analyst, a leader of their Soviet Russia desk, and a briefer of three presidents of the United States, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Ronald Reagan. Now we have President Donald Trump just gave his, I guess, State of the Union speech, although the timing was different. And Ray, I'm going to turn to you as an expert on these things. What did he really say? What is the significance of it?
Well, Bob, it was quite significant. First and foremost, I would point out that he has referred to himself as king, sort of indirectly. This was kind of a reflection of his consideration of the divine right of kings. Um, he said some things that are impossible to believe. Yeah, I was reminded of Alice in Wonderland, Alice complains that it's really hard to believe impossible things. And the answer she gets, oh, please, you need practice. I believe six impossible things before breakfast in the morning. So, one thing we can point out is that this divine right of kings, where he says, and I want to quote him here, I believe that my life was saved the day in Butler for a very good reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. I believe that I do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Whoa. Okay. So a lot of people believe that. And so it follows from the latest poll I saw 76% of the American people watching thought that was a great speech. Okay. That they believe this trash too. Now, I'm not fond of quoting mainstream media, but CBS has done a little fact checking, all right? You remember this business about Social Security recipients over the age of 100, you know? I'm looking forward to that. I only have 15 years to be 100, and then I'll still get Social Security benefits even if I'm dead. Well, give me a break. Here's what CBS says about that. Fact check. What Trump said was, believe it or not, government databases list 4.7 million Social Security members from people aged 100 to 109. It lists, and it goes on, it lists 3.9 million from ages, get this now, ages 130 to 139. 3.5 million, this is Social Security databases. 3.5 million from ages 140 to 149, and end quote. And money is still being paid to many of them, period, end quote. Go on here. Alice in Wonderland. Look, the his own Social Security administrator has said, look, there's no evidence. There is no evidence that there are large numbers of people over 100 years old receiving Social Security benefits illegally. And besides that, there is no one living in the United States that is over 116. So that's what the new commissioner has said. Uh, they may be listed in these databases. They're not receiving benefits. So let's put that right out there.
Let me just, I didn't get your intro here. I mean, what you were saying. You're saying there's a CBS poll that says 75% of the people think he has been picked by God to
No,
make
this is
America
this.
great.
Well, the CBS figures have to do with this business about Social Security
Oh,
recipients over 100 years old. The poll, I forget where I saw it. I just saw it this morning. They interviewed people who watched the speech. Now, bear in mind that most people watching this speech are probably Republicans and more inclined to believe Trump. So 76 is probably skewed, but my God, it's still
but what is the part they were supporting that he has?
just the general speech. Just
Oh, that
just
they liked. I mean,
the oh yeah. Well, let's face it. I mean, it was great TV. I mean, it was orchestrated. Almost 2 hours. Give me a break.
Okay,
Go
but
ahead.
you're the expert here, so let's just cut right to the chase. What did you
Okay.
make of it? What positions did he outline? And I wanted to ask you about a very good historian at the University of Wisconsin. We posted his article on SheerPost this morning, Alfred McCoy, and he picks up on Trump's having talked about McKinley as a great unrecognized president and so forth. And McKinley is the author of probably the rawest kind of imperialism that America had. And some people think it didn't last very long in that raw form. It exposed too much. But is this speech? I mean, you're an expert now. I mean, I don't care. The polls can make it, people get it wrong, but you briefed American presidents and on what they should say and not say. What first of all, what does the speech really say of significance about foreign policy and domestic policy? Just give us your summary of what you got from it.
Domestic policy, it says, look, God has anointed me to do what needs to be done. Witness the fact that God saved me in Butler, Pennsylvania. Now, this business about abroad, uh, well, McKinley, as you mentioned, Bob, is the worst possible imperialist president that you could cite. I mean, he's the guy. The end of the 19th century started reaching out to Cuba and Philippines and Hawaii. He got us into an imperial mode. So here's Trump sort of, well, I can't believe that he doesn't know this. So he's just saying, look, I'm going to be just like McKinley. And after I die, they're going to name a mountain after me, too. Okay. Well, maybe they'll put me up at Mount Rushmore. The guy is a megalomania guy. And not only that, uh, the word sociopath comes to mind. And when I say that, I'm saying that he doesn't really care very much about people. Okay. Now, witness the fact that by closing down USAID, uh, hundreds of thousands of people are going to get TB, they're going to get polio, they're going to die of malnutrition. And that was documented by USAID specialists before he and Musk shut that down. Okay. So, yeah, there was money devoted to overturning governments. I'm glad that's gone. But I'm not glad that people take delight in the fact that people less privileged than we are going to die now. Little kids are going to die from TB, from all kinds of preventable diseases because we are not funding these health programs, which John Kennedy, to his credit, started and now has petered out. So I guess going back to God, this God. Well, my pastor says, your God just may be my God's worst enemy. My God is not a God of vengeance. My God is a God of justice. And in the biblical sense of justice, it's not American kind of
Okay, but
justice,
Ray,
okay?
this is not about your relation to God. It's about what is in this speech that has significance for policy and where the world is headed. And you've briefed presidents before, so I want to know if you had briefed Trump and he gave this speech. What broke? Well, first of all, is there any new ground? What is the foreign policy different than you expected a week ago? Well, a lot
The
has been
interesting,
changing.
uh,
Let's take it on Ukraine. Let's take it on Gaza. Uh, how do you read it?
well, first on Gaza, uh, and Bob, your concept of God is really important because if you think God approves of genocide in Gaza, you got a very strange God indeed. What he said about the Middle East was in these words, quote, it's a rough neighborhood, actually, period, end quote. I don't know how to read that. He certainly didn't want to touch what Netanyahu is about to do in the Middle East because he doesn't know how to prevent it. He's not going to be able to prevent it. We're going to get a continuation of the genocide. And do not blanch before that word. This is not the God that anointed any of us who seek justice
Okay, I
first and
understand,
foremost.
but you're not the preacher today. Sorry to be interrupting, but some people call Biden genocide Joe. I think you did once or twice. Maybe I'm wrong, but certainly, if there's genocide going on now in relation to Gaza and the Palestinians, this did not start with Trump. In fact, there's less killing at the moment. There's a ceasefire. There's some exchange of hostages. So I really want to. Okay, so on Gaza, you're saying is basically a continuation of what Trump is doing. You think Netanyahu will control the show and so forth. What about Ukraine? Is he now? Uh, there was the tension with Zelensky. You're quite expert on the whole Russia situation. That's what you covered in the CIA. Is he backing off now? Is the peace initiative still in play? What hints were there or statements in this speech that are relevant
What
here?
what he said here, that I just got a letter from Vladimir Zelensky. Um, we spent $350 billion to help him. Um, and, to put that into perspective, says Trump, there's a big ocean separating us from Ukraine. Um, Earlier today, when Zelensky wrote the letter, he said Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace forever. Wow, way to go, Trump. Well, let's see how that works out. In other words, Trump is scared the bejesus out of Zelensky. Whether Zelensky can be permitted by his pro Nazi followers or accomplices to come to the table on anything close to Russian terms is something that needs to be examined. It's not likely. What else? Here's what Trump says about peace. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign that at any time, says Zelensky. Whoa. Well, what's that going to do? Is that going to get the U.S. involved in exploiting minerals and rare earth materials in Ukraine? God knows. I don't think there's much to that at all. The Russians have already said, look, we control a lot of that stuff already, and we have our own. You want to do a deal? We'll do a deal. I think that's pretty much stillborn. Finally, we have had serious discussions with Russia. Then I received strong signals that Zelensky now is ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? And he turns to Pocahontas, Senator Elizabeth Warren. He points right at her and says, Pocahontas, you don't want that, do you? You want a continuation of the war. And camera catchers are saying yes. So uh, Trump was at his demagogic best. I found it distasteful from all kinds of perspectives. But the takeaway here, Bob, is that he has the divine right of kings now. 76% of the American people think that was a great speech. He can do, or he thinks he can do, what the hell he wants. And when you looked at those applause, it looked like the old Soviet Union after a Soviet leader would make a speech, the whole text would be in Pravda and Izvestia. I used to have to read it. There were no translations then. Okay, at the end of each, at the end of about every third paragraph, it would say, "Бурные аплодисменты все стоят." Бурные, stormy applause. Everyone stands. Well, Congress outdid itself, at least the Republicans did yesterday. Бурные аплодисменты. They all stood up. I didn't count the times. There was too many to count. I can't count that high. So there's a demagogue. He says that he has the power to do this because God anointed him. That this is relevant, Bob. When you claim God's on your side, well, that's happened before, right? Gott mit uns, right? That was what the Germans had on their buckles as they went into Ukraine, into Russia, and into other
What
places.
was
So
the translation?
Gott mit uns means God is with us. He's on our side. Okay. So,
That buckle is not often mentioned. But I was feeling I really have thought a lot about this issue. But this was on the buckle of all of the German troops.
it was on the SS buckles. I'm not sure whether it
Oh,
was on the Bundeswehr itself, but it doesn't really matter. They were told that God is with them, and that's why it's important. Once you invoke the Almighty, say, yeah, yeah, He not only approves our plans, but He gave all that real estate that Israel claimed to Israel. It's written in the book, okay? Well, that's a perverse
I
interpretation
didn't
of the
expect to
book.
actually go into this, but let me point out to people listening, you are benefited from a Jesuit Catholic education, right? Uh,
Yeah, I guess when I went and studied theology in college, that was old school. During the 80s, I took a gentleman's master's degree at Georgetown University from Jesuits just back from San Salvador. Okay. There I learned what it's supposed to be like if you're supposed to be uh, heeding the counsel of a God of justice, justice being giving priority to the poor, to the refugee, to the widow, to the orphan. And that's not what Trump is all about. And that's why it's relevant to me personally, Bob. That's the kind of God that I believe cares about people. It's not the God that is vengeful and that was so exactly exemplified by not only what Trump said, but his whole manner, and of course the burni applaudissementi sostenut. It was quite a
so you
spectacle.
really were scared by this speech. It showed you a sign of not only a side of Trump, but a side of the country and the
It,
acceptance of this. That if I'm reading between the lines here, you are much more frightened than you about what's going on than you were, say, 40 hours ago or
I
24
am
hours ago,
mostly
whatever it's.
because although the public response was utterly predictable, it's still depressing in the extreme. In the old Soviet Union, the Communist Party, the Soviet Union, was completely in charge. They had interlocking directorates with the government. They were completely in charge. Now, the Republican Party, headed by Trump, is completely in charge of the executive, of the legislative, of the judicial branches of government. So, even though there's supposed to be a division of powers, Trump's got it. And worst off, I'll just say one more time, he thinks that God saved him in Butler, Pennsylvania to do what the hell he wants. And that means cutting aid to people who will now starve, who people who will now die of preventable diseases. Uh, and he can do this because Elon Musk is helping him, and everybody applauds. Now, as far as the drama last night, my God, it was a TV spectacular. I mean, with hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. I mean, you didn't get bored. There was this, the other, and all kinds of very cynical manipulation of people who suffered the loss of family members. I found it very distasteful, but that's me. That's domestic
Yeah, but
politics.
I'm relying on your expertise here, and not as a theater critic, but in terms of what moves policy, how does it sold to the public? I mean, that's the business that you really know as much as anybody I'm likely to talk to, maybe anybody in the country, and that you were there briefing the president and the executive branch. You're telling me that you are convinced that Donald Trump is driven by this religious uh, fervor that centers on his message regard more than well, the people you talk to, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, they all invoked a deity. They all claimed, God blesses America and has a special place, right? Reagan thought we were the city on the hill and so forth. Are you actually telling me that Ronald Reagan, who I have thought is, really more on the cynical side when it comes to religion, he's not a person who seems to be particularly observant, or mindful of these concerns. Doesn't seem to have benefited from your kind of religious structured education. After all, you spent your whole life within a Catholic education till you graduated. And I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying people who do that at least have a seriousness of purpose when they talk about religion. I thought the popular view is that Trump, he went his own way. Let's put it crudely. He was out to embellish himself and so forth, and he only invokes religion when it's convenient. You're now telling me you think he's really believes that he's been chosen and he's got to act accordingly.
No, he's just exploiting it. Okay.
Oh, oh.
Whether he believes that God saved him in Pennsylvania or not, he knows that he turned his head at the last minute. Now, did God say, "Hey, hey, Donald, turn your head at the last minute"? No, I don't think so. Okay, he's exploiting it in a way that's so crass that it dwarfs former exploitation by
I
former
got
presidents.
that, but if things don't work out, for instance, if he gets us into wars when he's promised he wouldn't, if inflation does not get controlled, if the good jobs don't come back despite tariffs, if we go into a depressed economy because of those tariffs, there's the American public, yes, invokes religion in all sorts of ways to win a football game, to win a bet, and everything else. But when the statistics come up cold and hard that you don't have jobs didn't come here as a result of the tariffs, or the tariffs hurt the economy, right? Or he's getting us into wars, or that the situation, say, in relation to Israel and West Bank, gets messier and that you have to send U.S. troops or get involved, or the situation in Ukraine. That's what I'm really asking you about. I think, yes, a speech will have an effect, but, even Hitler had to produce some decent cars like the Volkswagen. He had to actually get things to work, he had to deal with inflation. So I'm just asking you if your alarm, and it's clear, I've interviewed you quite a few times now, and this is a different Ray McGovern. You really think you saw something very dangerous, frightening, and this is it's not an interview we would have done even 24 hours ago. Am I misreading you?
I think so, Bob. Again, what I'm saying is that he masterfully exploited his divine right of kings, so to speak, by saying once again, my life was saved for a very good reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. And I believe that. I do. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Bob, just as a kind of a codicil here, God bless America. That is completely anti biblical. You don't use the imperative voice with God. There's nothing in Scripture that says you can order God to do this or that, to bless these people or bless those. So people don't realize this. But what he already say is, God bless this world, all the people in it, without exception, not just America, not just Israel, not just me, but everyone. And of course, that's not the American tradition. And as long as American exceptionalism, so codified last night by Trump himself, prevails, most Americans will say, well, yeah, God is blessing us in a special way. And that game is over. We're no longer the superpower. We're going to be challenged by Russia, by China, by all those people in Asia and Africa. The game is up. And I don't know how long Trump is going to get. Well, this goes to your point, how long he's going to get away with this. But in the interim, I'm scared to death. He'll do crazy things and allow Netanyahu to do crazy things. I think it's better with respect to Ukraine. He's getting some good advice on that. I think there will be peace in Ukraine. So it's a mixed bag, Bob. But I see a deranged person who doesn't care about people, who's a sociopath. Witness what he's doing with aid. I mean, that's really important to me. All the administrators of aid pointed out all the thousands of people who will be affected by the cutoff of medical aid and all other kinds of things. So, if he's a sociopath with respect to foreign people and people that don't look like us, Well, he's going to do the same thing in this country, and the poor will continue to increase. And yeah, I come from a faith perspective. We Catholics brag about what we call the preferential option for the poor. And I'll just spell it out for you in one sentence. The bishop said this 50 years ago, all right? That means that no one is entitled to amass still more wealth that they don't need, while others lack the bare necessities of life. Last time Trump was president, the gap between the haves and the have nots widened. Now it's going to do the same thing now. For him to invoke God as approving all this stuff is, in my view, blasphemy.
You know, it's a sobering perspective. You haven't been this hard on Trump before. You saw some contradictions. You thought that he was going to be less willing to get us into wars. He's
Yeah.
promised that. You felt that the Democrats had a lot of responsibility. For instance, income gap really started widening most dramatically under Bill Clinton and his deregulation of Wall Street. I'm saying this out of respect because I know your opinions are considered. I know you don't just say things, even though I'm not the president and you're not briefing me. I know you're a serious person. And so my takeaway from this conversation, is if Ray McGovern is worried, then I should be worried. And you saw something in that speech or heard something in that speech. I don't want to misread this, but it seems to me you felt this speech revealed something even more frightening about what's going on than you felt 24
Well,
hours
Bob,
ago.
just to kind of pick up on that, I watched many speeches of Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev. It was sort of like a feedback, a bad memory last night. It was a person who thought he had total power because, in his case, the Republican Party, unlike the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, or like it, the Republican Party had a corner on the power, and it does, and the performance there and the reaction showed me that a dangerous Trump with the divine right of kings now will feel empowered to do what the hell he wants, not only abroad, but inside this country, rounding up refugees, rounding up widows and orphans, and that just cuts to the quick. That's not justice. That's not my God. And I'll just repeat my pastor saying, your God might be the worst enemy of my God. Trump's God is the worst enemy of my God. My God.
Well, I'm not gonna, well, let's see how it moves, but it's one of the more sobering, not the most sobering conversation I've had in some time. So I'm gonna wrap it up there and let people respond and see where it goes. See you next week, Ray, with another one of these uh, two old timers from the Bronx. Sure isn't that like when Roosevelt was president and I was born, and you were around then too, so a little bit. All right, see you later.
Bob, I don't know.
Uh,
I don't know how your family reacted when FDR died. Uh, but my dad, uh, the only time I saw him really cry without being consoled, okay, and he told me very early what it meant. And the Bronx, we used to say, as you may know, but in the Catholic circles, when you are baptized, membership in the Democratic Party and the local union was conferred at baptism. Okay, well, that was because FDR saved all of our derrieres, saved our country for God's sake. And my dad said, Democrats care about little people, about young people, about people who are on the outskirts now. That's no longer the case. That's a
well,
great sorrow for
unfortunately,
me,
Ray,
and they're paying the price now for what they've done
unfortunately, the
until
unraveling
now.
of the Democratic Party's commitment to working people, to ordinary people, and so forth. Uh, Again, it came. Yeah, Ronald Reagan certainly went after him, even though his own father had worked in the New Deal, and he had said the New Deal saved him. And when I interviewed Ronald Reagan, he told me at that moment he still thought he had great admiration for FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But the fact is, he wanted to unravel the New Deal, and then the guy who really got it done was Bill Clinton. He got it done. He deregulated Wall Street. He reversed the main, Glass Steagall, the main restraint on Wall Street greed. It got unleashed, and it was an alliance between the Democrats and Republicans that created this big mess, and where the billionaires control everything, and ordinary people feel so frantic they even find comfort in somebody like Trump, hoping that he's going to make it better. So yeah, that's just the most depressing of our conversations. I'm going to stop now, or I'm not going to be able to function for the rest of the day. But we'll hear what other people think about this.
Let
Yeah,
me
you got
just add a footnote, Bob, if I may. You talk about what FDR did in our country. That's wonderful. That was golden. Now, Clinton, in contrast, not only screwed up our country economically, but screwed up our country vis-a-vis the Soviet Union, later Russia. Okay. Now, how did he do that? He sent his Wall Street guys and his uh, Harvard economists to exploit the Russian economy between 1990 and when Putin came in 2000. That's what the deal was. They exploited it. They worked with oligarchs east and west to draw all the riches they could out of Russian resources. And that's what the Russians remember. One little factoid here that I would add. Between 1991 and 1995, according to the World Bank, mind you, the average age at which a Russian male died went from 63 to 57. 4 years actually, 91 to 95. My God, they were dying in the street. That's why Putin came in. That's
Wait a
why
minute.
he
I'm
worked this
missing
miracle.
this. Ray, I'm missing the statistic. You said the average age
Yeah,
that they.
a Russian male before 1991
Yeah.
died at age 73.
Ah.
Sorry, I got that wrong before. 73. And after, well, after Yeltsin's first term, the average age at which a Russian male died was 67. Okay? Now, that speaks volumes at what happened in. And that was when all of a sudden Yeltsin had to run for re election. And who won re-election for Yeltsin? It's very clear. U.S. money, the Harvard boys, and the U.S. Treasury people. So, if you're looking at Putin, he watched all this and he saw what happened. Instead, in spite of that, he reached out to the United States, wanted to join NATO, suggested that to Bill Clinton. And Clinton says, "Join NATO? You Russians? Yeah, join NATO." He said, "Well, I'll get back to you on that." It goes back that evening and says, "Well,
Uh,
my team says that's a no go.
okay, so
You
we
can't
got
join
that. So
NATO."
you would think the one area that Ray McGovern would still think Trump might be bringing about some progress based on what you've said over the years was in this negotiation with Putin, which, after all, is the other nation that has all those nuclear bombs that can destroy all life on this planet. Now, others are catching up. China's coming along, but still, this relationship with Russia, we haven't talked about that. But did you find any reassurance in the speech that he's actually going to try to bring, be successful now and maybe getting peace in relation to Ukraine and Russia?
Well, I didn't need much reassurance in the speech. His actions speak louder than his words. There was one sentence saying, "Oh yeah, we're also negotiating with Russia, with making that better," and they are. And Bob, this is big. Okay, this is really big. But I guess personally, when I see our country enabling, arming genocide, and a president that thinks that God has kind of offered or authorized him to do that, that that puts in bas relief what people who care about justice, people who care about sociopaths being president should be concerned about. So that was my lesson from the speech. He's doing very good things with respect to Russia. I don't know how much that will carry over with the people he has now in advising him. How much it will carry over to Israel and Gaza? That's a completely different kettle of fish. I'm much more pessimistic on that, and that's what we're doing. Genocide. I'll say one more time. Genocide. I never thought I would be an American citizen living in a time when my country is participating and enabling and arming
And the
genocide
genocide you're referring to is in the Middle East, or it's also with Ukraine, or
in Gaza. In Gaza.
Gaza. Okay, so yeah, but I'm through playing devil's advocate. At least there is a ceasefire of sorts. At least there has been an exchange of
This
hostages.
week.
But huh?
Tune in next week, Bob.
Yeah. Well, that's why we talk to you, Ray. You got this expertise. Anybody who spent time briefing Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford and Ronald Reagan, and now is worried. You're more worried than you were by those three guys, right?
Yeah, and just as a sort of an aside, Bob, so people realize that I wasn't picked to brief Republican presidents. It was just a matter of coincidence that I was at that level of my career where when Nixon came in, I was on the briefing staff, Ford, and then I was senior enough to conduct one on one briefings of Ronald Reagan's chief national security officials, including the vice president, secretary of state, defense, and so forth.
Yeah.
Truth be told, Ronnie preferred to sleep in, okay, and he would listen to what these people that I had briefed wanted to say to him at 11:30 when he had had his
No,
coffee.
I got that. And I'm not claiming that you were in his ear all the time, but I mean, you're familiar with three presidents. You were in the CIA as the head of the Russia desk, or Soviet Union desk, yeah, for a while. And for 27 years, you tried to inform American foreign policy. And you had certainly as much familiarity with what the executive branch was considering, was up to, what was doing. I mean, you were there. I'm not claiming that you were running the country, far from it. But the fact is, for you to be as worried as you are now, I'm just taking this out away from this interview or discussion, is really quite troubling to me. Uh, because after all, you are trying to be objective about Trump. You were presenting, well, on the one hand, he's not this and that. Now you seem to have gone over to this view that we have a nightmarish tyranny in the offering.
Well, for the simple people abroad and in our country, it will be a nightmare, particularly in view of the fact that Trump thinks he's ordained by God to do things that an Old Testament God may have ordained, but not the God of love, the God of compassion, the God that cares about the little people, and that's the one that I think prevails. I had a Jesuit tell me one time, "Look, here's my theology. One sentence. It all depends on who you think God is and how God feels when little people are pushed around." Whoa, that spoke to me. That's my theology as well. Little people are being pushed around throughout the world, even in this country. It's a bad scene when everybody applauds that.
All right, we'll end on that note. And I want to thank our executive producer, Joshua Shear, Diego Ramos, who writes the intro, Max Jones, who does the video, the JKW Foundation for supplying some support funding, and in memory of Gene Stein, a very independent and important writer, and Integrity Media with Len Goodman, an attorney in Chicago, who give us also some additional support and involved in supporting more independent and free journalism. See you next week with another edition of my conversation with Ray McGovern. See you, Ray. Take care.
Thanks, Bob.